it's Josephine Olivia Gross here. Today, I'll be reading Harriet Tubman, Rebecca Lee Crumpler, Mary Bozer, and Ida B. Wells. From the book Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. Harriet Tubman, abolitionist, nurse, scout, spy. One of 9 children, Harriet was born into slavery under the name Araminta Harriet Ross. Both her parents were West Africans from the Ashanti warrior people. While many of her siblings were sold and traded to distant plantations, one good fortune Harriet managed was to remain with her parents throughout her youth. When she was 15, Harriet was accidentally hit in the head with an iron weight and fell into a coma for 3 days. Her brain injury resulted in narcolepsy, a permanent disorder that caused her to fall asleep at random times. Fearing her slave owner would eventually discover her injury, she decided to run away to avoid the risk of being sold or traded. After escaping from the Confederate South in 1849, Harriet could have stayed in the North, where slavery was outlawed. But knowing it was possible to escape, she wanted to return for her family and anyone else she could rescue. Over 11 years, she returned to the South 13 times and led more than 17 men, women, and children to freedom and safety via the secret system called the Underground Railroad. Known as a conductor, she never lost a passenger on her journeys. Even though it was dangerous, she continually put her life at risk for others. Later, during the American Civil War, she served as an army nurse and went undercover as a spy for the North. Harriet was always looking to help other people. What very little she had, she gave away to others. She lived in poverty for most of her life and donated her time, money, and property to those in need. In 2016, the U.S. Treasury announced a historic proposal to change the $20 bill. It would replace the face of President Andrew Jackson with Harriet, making her the first woman on the front of any American paper currency. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, physician. From the very beginning, caring for others was a part of Rebecca's life. She was raised in Pennsylvania by her aunt, who provided healthcare services to the people in her neighborhood. Helping her community became her passion and her life's mission. She attended a private school in Massachusetts and went on to work as a nurse for 8 years. In 1860, she applied to an all-white medical school, the New England Female Medical College. A bold and risky move, but she was accepted. Rebecca graduated in 1864, becoming the first African-American woman doctor in the country. Out of more than 50,000 physicians in the United States at the time, only about 300 were women, and Rebecca was the only black woman. She began her practice in Boston, specializing in the care of women and children. But when the Civil War came to an end, she moved to Richmond, Virginia, to work with the Freedmen's Bureau. The fallen Confederate South was extremely hostile to the newly freed slaves, so Rebecca worked with the Bureau to provide health care to them. Rebecca had been born free in Delaware, the state with the highest number of free black people before the war. She was new to the adversity and racism of the South, but she endured it in order to help the poor and needy. Throughout her career, Rebecca was concerned with the health of women and children. In 1883, she published a 2-part text entitled A Book of Medical Discourses. The first part focuses on care for infants and the second part on women's health. It is possibly the first medical article published by a black woman. Mary Bozer, Civil War spy. Very little is recorded about Mary's life. What we do know is that she was born into slavery in Richmond, Virginia, around 1840. She was purchased by the wealthy Vanloo family as a companion for their daughter Elizabeth. The Vanloos were no ordinary family in the Confederate South, though. They had a secret. They were spies for the free Northern Unionist states and abolitionists involved in the secret Underground Railroad. Before the Civil War, when Mary was still in her teens, Elizabeth granted her freedom and arranged for her to receive an education in Philadelphia. Mary wanted to assist the Van Loos in their efforts against the Confederacy. At that time in the South, it was illegal for a black person to be educated or even to learn to read. For this reason, no one would ever suspect that Mary was a threat. As a slave, she could hide in plain sight. So she agreed to go undercover as a slave in the house of Jefferson Davis, the Confederate Southern president. While cleaning, she would steal glances at confidential memos, and while serving dinner, she would eavesdrop on conversations between Confederate officials. She passed information about troop movements and army plans to Elizabeth, who passed them along to Union officials. Rumor has it that Mary had a photographic memory and was able to read a page once and recite it back word for word. After the war, Mary educated freed slaves and traveled around the United States giving speeches. For a long time, she was careful to conceal her true identity, using a variety of aliases. Eventually, she disappeared completely, but she is remembered. In 1995, she was inducted into the American Military Intelligence Hall of Fame. Ida B. Wells, journalist, activist. Ida was a natural-born activist. Wherever she saw injustice, she stood up against it. She was born a slave in Mississippi, but emancipation came to the South when she was still a child, and this meant she had the opportunity to get an education. After college, she worked as a teacher, but lost her job for criticizing the poor conditions in black segregated schools. In 1884, 71 years before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, Ida refused to leave her seat in the woman's carriage on a train in Memphis, Tennessee. She had purchased a first-class ticket, but was asked to leave and join the African-American carriage. Ida did not go quietly. She brought a legal case against the railway company and eventually won it. There was no rule that said black women could not ride in the women's carriage. However, laws allowing segregation soon appeared in Tennessee, and Ida's case was overturned. Afterwards, she wrote a newspaper article about the incident under the name Lola. Later, she became known as Lola, Princess of the Press. Journalism became her outlet. She was the co-owner and editor of the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight, and later the Free Speech. She took a strong stance against lynching and faced death threats for her words. In 1898, she led a huge anti-lynching campaign all the way to the White House. Ida knew the power of words and knowledge and continued to use her voice to stand up for what was right. Thank you for listening, and next Tuesday I'll be reading Zora Neale Hurston, Alma Woodsey Thomas, Alice Ball, and Bessie Coleman from the book Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. Have a great day and see you next week.
Wanna get to heaven, Mama tell you how. Keep that hand on the gospel plow. Just keep that hand on the plow. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on.